Jannik Sinner stepped onto the practice courts at Roland Garros with a mission, not just to warm up, but to send a message. The world number one isn't here to make up the numbers. He's here to finish something that only a handful of players in history have ever managed to complete. Coco Gauff wasn't far behind him, going through her own final preparations with the kind of quiet intensity that only comes from someone who knows exactly what it feels like to lift that trophy in Paris. She did it before. She wants to do it again. And with the main draw now officially underway, on the Parisian clay, both of them are going to be right at the heart of everything for the next 2 weeks. Before competitive play began, Roland Garros organized official practice sets for the players, proper structured sessions with umpires calling the score and a live scoreboard running throughout. It wasn't just a casual knock. The idea was to give players something as close to match conditions as possible before the pressure of the real thing kicks in. Smart move from the organizers, and the players clearly took it seriously. Sinner faced Alexander Blocks, a young Belgian who had just come off a run to the semifinals in Madrid. Not a bad tune-up opponent by any stretch. Sinner handled it comfortably, taking the set 6-2 and looking sharp in the process. Clean ball striking, good movement, and that trademark, focused expression that gives very little away about what's actually going on inside his head. Gauff's session was equally convincing. She went up against Tiansoa's Sarah Rajana, a French wildcard with home crowd support and nothing to lose. Gauff won 6-3, looking composed throughout and dealing with the kind of tricky, unpredictable tennis that local players often bring. Exactly the sort of preparation she needed ahead of what is expected to be a long, deep run in the draw. They weren't the only ones making headlines in those pre-tournament sessions. Several other big names were out on court getting their work in before things got serious. Alina Svitolina came out on top against Jessica Pegula 6-4, a result that will give the Ukrainian plenty of confidence heading into the first round. Pegula has been one of the most consistent players on tour over the last couple of years, so beating her, even in a practice format, is never something you take lightly. Elena Rybakina matched that exact scoreline, beating Sorana Sirsti 6-4 as well. Rybakina has been quietly building a strong case as one of the favorites on any surface, and she looked exactly like someone who means business as Roland Garros gets going. Taylor Fritz also turned heads in his session, putting together a dominant 6-1 win over Miomir Kekmanovic. Fritz has been working hard to establish himself as a genuine Grand Slam contender rather than just a dangerous floater in the draw, and performances like that, even in practice, suggest the work is paying off. But the moment that really stopped people in their tracks came when Sinner switched gears after his practice set and walked out onto Court Philippe Chatrier alongside Rafael Nadal for a relaxed hit together. Let that sink in for a second. Sinner, the man aiming to complete a career Grand Slam at the very tournament where Nadal built his entire legend. The two of them sharing a court, trading ground strokes in front of a crowd that absolutely soaked up every single rally. Nadal, who has called Roland Garros home for the better part of 2 decades, was there in a different capacity this time, but his presence still drew a massive reaction. Fans packed the stands just to watch 2 generations of the SportShare moment on the most iconic clay court in the world. It was exactly the kind of scene that reminds you why tennis at its best is genuinely something special. The practice set results themselves don't go on anyone's record. Nobody's ranking points shift based on what happened in those sessions. But the value isn't in the scoreline, it's in the rhythm, the feel, the competitive sharpness that only comes from playing points that actually matter, even slightly. Players would have walked away from those sessions with a much clearer read on where their game is, what areas they want to sharpen up, and how their body is responding to the conditions in Paris. Clay court tennis at Roland Garros demands a very specific kind of adjustment. The bounce is higher, the ball sits up differently, rallies are longer, and the margin for error shifts compared to hard courts. Getting competitive reps in before the main draw begins isn't a luxury, it's a genuine necessity for anyone who wants to go the distance over 2 weeks. Now, while all of that was unfolding on court, there was some notable news off it as well. Roland Garros announced that attendance figures during opening week had broken a new record. 138,000 fans came through the gates across 6 days before the main draw even started. That is a remarkable number, and it speaks to how much interest and appetite there is for this tournament right now. The sport is growing, the stars are compelling, and Paris in late May remains one of the great sporting destinations on the planet. But not everything off the court was celebratory. Aryna Sabalenka, the WTA world number 1, made a statement of her own, and she didn't need to say a single word to make it. Sabalenka walked out of her pre-tournament press conference in protest. The issue at the center of it all is prize money, and specifically the question of how Roland Garros distributes its revenue. Currently, 15% of the tournament's total revenue goes toward prize money for the players. For a grand slam of the scale and global reach, a growing number of players feel that figure simply isn't good enough. Sabalenka's walkout wasn't a quiet or ambiguous gesture. It was a deliberate, public statement from one of the most prominent players in the sport right now. And when someone at that level decides to make their frustration visible in that way, it tends to cut through the noise. She's not alone in feeling this way. Conversations around player compensation, revenue sharing, and the broader economic structure of professional tennis have been getting louder for a while now. Roland Garros becoming the focal point for that frustration this year was perhaps inevitable given the numbers involved and the profile of the tournament. How the organizers respond to that pressure, both publicly and in future negotiations, will be something worth watching as the tournament progresses. For now, though, the clay is ready, the players have had their final preparations, and 2 weeks of Roland Garros tennis are officially underway. Sinner chasing history, Gauff defending her crown, a record number of fans already through the gates, and the prize money debate simmering in the background. There is plenty to keep your attention between now and the final weekend. Paris is never short of drama, and this edition looks like it's going to deliver plenty of it.